Hello, and good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm so glad you're here to spend some time with me to talk about some of the pressing issues of the day, which I would say would be the Torah portion. This will be my last time doing this 6 o'clock slot on Tuesday evenings. I am in Florida, and it's so dark so early here. I don't even know if you can see. I mean, I have my light on, but it's so dark and it's just really hard to light everything. And I always feel like I'm not as fresh. So I'm going to switch my times. So just be aware of that's something that you can look for. I will post what time it will be. But of course, these shows are archived on Messianic Lamb Network, and they're streamed through YouTube. So go right ahead and just look for those. But I'm glad you're here, and we will just deal with the darkness here. I hope it's well lit for you. And I just want to always, as I say, encourage you, no matter what your day has been like or where you come from or what your perspective has been, let's remember that the future begins now. So I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about some things today that I want to get into to help maybe shift you into moving forward with some positivity and see how the messages of the Bible are designed to move us forward in all good things. And so first, let me just mention a couple things in case you're new to the program. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a doctoral degree in religious education, and I am an attachment specialist. And if you've heard my name before and you didn't know why, it might be because there's the books called the Becky book series, which are written by a number of women authors, and I am one of them. And so I thought I'd just mention really quickly some of my books, and then just launch into what we're talking about. But sometimes it's just good to remind people what I have going on here. First of all, I have my Becky books. So these are Building and Encouraging the Kingdom of Yeshua is what Becky stands for. And I have 4 of these books. I have one here that's Divorce and Remarriage in the Bible, and it's got a lot of really good information. These are not hugely fat books, and they're extremely inexpensive, and you can get them on Amazon. But check this out. I really think that this book is a great book for anybody that's dealt with divorce, knows anyone with divorce, anything like that. But if I were you, I would get that book. And then I have this sort of trilogy of books. Peter's Vision, Colossal Controversies, and 21st Century Words is something that I think are really helpful. Or is it? It's actually first century. What is it? It's First Century Words. And it's for the 21st century believers. So anyway, that's how that is supposed to be worded. That this is about the dietary laws, but we bring a lot of other things out, because you really can't study one thing in the Bible without finding out what it's really attached to, which is about attachment. And then lastly, in this area, I have a children's book called The Forgiveness Charts. And this book is basically a holiday classic. It's illustrated, and kids love it, adults love it. It's designed for children and adults to enjoy. I was always thinking during Torah holidays, people or anyone could just pull it out and have a story that's got a great moral message for everybody to enjoy. And then I have this book coming out soon, in a few days, actually. I'm just going through a couple more edits, little things. But anyway, this is called Safe Conversations, a 40-Day Journey. And every time I pull the book up, I feel like it affects the light. Look at that. Woo! Look at that, because it focuses on that. And then I need to there we go. So my camera is doing that. But anyway, this is the interactive follow-up guide to this marital book that's called Created for Connection. And so I'd encourage you to check those out. I didn't write Created for Connection. Kenneth Sandifer and Dr. Sue Johnson wrote that. So go ahead and check those out. But anyway, good to see you. Let's get started. Today's Torah portion, which I just want to bring a couple things out. Actually, let me mention one other thing. I'm not turning on the chat today. I wanted to explain for you. I was reading a comment the other day, and I kind of read it and read the name and didn't really realize, and somebody was talking about somebody else. And I just want to mention something. Whenever we talk about people, even if it's our children, and we use their name or whatever, we talk about our children, I want you to remember everybody does deserve privacy, and our children, when we just want to vent about our kids to other people, on some level, that's part of being a mom and whatever. But remember, your kids are people too. And we don't want to really create narratives or whatever. But anyway, remember, gossip isn't always just, mean girls. All right. Sometimes it can be well-intentioned or whatever. But anyway, just want to mention that. So today we won't have the chat, which will be new. I always have the chat. But anyway, just wanted to get into our portion now. And the portion runs from Genesis 37 to 40. I'm not going to obviously read that whole thing. I just want to read a little bit of a few things. I want to bring a few things out to encourage you, and we'll just see where we go. Okay. So this is where we are talking about Joseph's dreams. Now, I always want to say, oh, that's my favorite part of the Bible. This really is, I would say, a story that has mesmerized me since the very first time I've ever heard it. And if you ever get a chance to watch Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus, I would strongly recommend that. It's a great documentary, archaeological documentary. Tim Mahoney does a beautiful job. I watch it all the time and rewatch it and learn new things from it. And it's a great paradigm shift about not being stuck in biases about the way we think about things, but actually look at the evidence. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that's a really fun way to also go through the Bible. There's a lot of ways to read the Bible. One of them is to look at the evidence and just not read through a seared conscience where we think we know what it says all the time because we've been taught. And, a lot of what we've been taught is right, but sometimes we can go a little deeper and maybe even see things in a fresh way that other people have seen. Like I said, I'm not bringing anything groundbreaking out. This is all about attachment. My perspective and my lens is always going to be about attachment. So if we get into Joseph's dreams, so we get into some things in the Bible, and I talk about this all the time, is that the Bible, a lot of times we want to package the Bible to people as, this is just not hard, easy, this is great, don't be upset. But a lot of people read the Bible, and there's so many things that just do not understand. They're antithetical to our culture. It can be a challenging thing to do. And I don't want you to ever feel like it's your job to make anything palatable to people in that way. And if it's complicated, fine. Life is complicated. People are complicated. Relationships are complicated. And the Bible demonstrates stories about people that are complicated. And so don't worry about that. Messiah will come and explain everything. It's all perfect, but as we go and we don't know answers to certain things, I don't know is a pleasant answer. And it shouldn't be something you're ever ashamed of saying. I don't know. Okay, so let's get into chapter 37. And it talks about Joseph. So Joseph would be the son of Jacob and Rachel. And we know that Jacob loved Rachel, ended up marrying Leah through a nefarious conspiracy, quite sort of a underhanded trick. But he worked after he had worked 7 years for Rachel, and then he works another 7 and gets Rachel, and they end up having Joseph, and then they have Benjamin. And so that is complicated to a lot of people, the story of Rachel and Leah and what that means and what that represents and what's favoritism and what's all that, right? And yes, that's complicated. And we don't know all the answers, but we can work on gaining some understanding by just reading this through the lens of trust and attachment. So let's read this. Let's see. Joseph was 17 years old, and he was pasturing the flocks. Very common theme of the shepherds, right? All the shepherds, the special ones. In many ways, this humble thing, the whole idea of people being sheep, of the particular Jacob sheep, right? This is something that's interesting because he was the one who tended the flocks. He was a boy with the sons. Okay, so let's just keep going here. about Joseph, I want to just talk about him bringing a bad report of them to their father. So he had been put in the position of sort of like, I don't know, be my eyes and ears. And he brings a bad report to his father. Now it says here in verse 3, it says, now Israel, and now Jacob is Israel, because remember, he wrestled with the messenger, with the angel, and gets his name changed from Joseph to Israel. It says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. That's a really complicated thing for people to read. What's interesting here is if you read on, it says, because he was the son of his old age. So what's interesting about this is that this love that he had for Joseph was based on the Jacob's season, and not because Joseph was any more precious or lovable, right? Though we're going to get into some of that too, about nature. Okay, so let's just keep going. So he gives him a special garment. So he's showing his favoritism. And of course, the brothers are jealous. So the father is older. And if you think about older fathers, right, the last kid, the last couple kids, they usually get away with more. The parents know there's probably not a lot more down the pike, if any. I want to enjoy this, this childhood and milk it for all it is. I don't know if you understand that, but people who've had a bunch of children can say, yeah, I really just wanted to enjoy that last baby even more. And that is natural and normal. It doesn't mean you don't enjoy the first, right? But it can take time to adjust to, child rearing is a study of sleep deprivation, if anything, at first, and endurance and everything that you're learning with that first one. You get really practiced at it. You've seen them fall down the stairs 15 times, like all your kids. And then you get that last couple or that last one, and you're like you're a lot more comfortable with parenting. You've learned a lot. So it wouldn't really be that weird that the brothers would be jealous of this younger child that the father seems to favor. So I'm not trying to make that palatable, but if we look at the evidence and we look at ourselves, and people are people, that's not really out of the realm of what I would think is possible or probable even, right? So they couldn't speak peacefully to him. So he didn't have a great relationship with his brothers. So he grew up with that angst in the home, with that tension. Now, what's interesting is that it specifically says he was 17 years old. So 17 in the Bible, and just research I've done, which is interesting, and I've researched other people's research about the number 17. It's a combination of the number 7 and 10. And when you look at 10, a lot of people believe that 10 stands for order and 7 stands for perfection. So if you think about like perfect order, so there's a message in my mind that there could be something with this, that something's going to begin in Joseph's life. He's going to be put in perfect order through a lot of weird things. I give you that. But if you look at this, just look at the number 17 just for a second, because it's interesting. These little clues, is that was the great flood starts on the 17th day of that second month. And in the ark, you have the 8 passengers that Noah brought with him, and which is interesting because Noah and his passengers, the 8, the infinity, right? They rested on Mount Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month. Okay. And then if you even look in the book of Daniel, and on this I was researching someone, and there was no name here with whoever was putting this out, but they talk about he's the beast in that vision had 7 heads and 10 horns. And so you see that makes 17. And then it also talks about the time of the end, right? Where in Revelation, you see that beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. which interestingly to me, when you see Daniel as a prophet, and then you see this prophetic imagery of something not good, it's like a tricky duel, right? It's like even. They both had perfect order. There's something about that. I think it's interesting. We need to know. And so if we look at the number 17, just a few other little facts here. Judah is the tribe of Judah's king, Rehoboam, which was the son of Solomon. He was on the throne for 17 years, which is interesting because you think of perfect order. How would that rule be perfect order? But perfect order doesn't always mean something attractive to us. It could mean something is being set in motion that's going to bring about perfect order. Okay, so remember, we don't always know exactly all the outcomes, but the beginnings we can find in hindsight. Interesting. And so, of course, Joseph's 17 years old when he was sold into slavery, because that's what happens in the story, right? They sell him to the Ishmaelites that take him to Egypt. And it was actually, they're reunited after 17 years. So I think this is interesting because you see Jacob, and Jacob is getting his son back, but he lost 17 years and then he gets reunited. So there's just like the loss and the reuniting. So you see how that can be both things. It can be perceived as negative. It can be perceived as positive. So then Joseph, let's get back to Joseph, and we're on verse 5, and it talks about how he has a dream and he tells his brothers. And of course, they just hate him even more because, of course, what is he dreaming about is something symbolic to people bowing to him, his family. And they hate him for this, right? That he's a dreamer of dreams, that the dreams suggest he would be some sovereign of some sort in the family when he was much younger. And the father is like, can you not say this to your brothers? But of course, it says he kept it in his mind. He kept that saying in his mind. So he's sold by his brothers to the Ishmaelites, but then he gets to Egypt. So we're leaping forward. I mean, this story is so massively incredible. Just read it and read it and read it. But let's just get into talking about Joseph a little bit. The things I wanted to bring out was Joseph has brought into Egypt. We're in 39, verse 1. And Potiphar, who was Pharaoh's officer, his first officer, very important person in that system, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, he had brought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. So very quickly, as a slave, he becomes very important. He could read, and the sages talk about this, like he was taught how to read. That was because they wanted them to read the Torah, and not everybody was taught to read, but he could read. And so he understood written things and symbols and how to put things together on paper, right? So his master saw that the Lord was with him. Now, what's interesting is this is an Egyptian master, and he sees the Lord is with him. The Egyptian sees something about our God, right? And that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him the overseer of his house, and he puts him in charge of all that he has. And from the time that he made him overseer of his house, over all he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. That is, do you ever pray that? You're worried about your kids or something that they're going through. And you might even have kids that are maybe doing something you don't agree with. And you're like, just for me, because I've been your girl, can you just not let me go through this? Can you just help that person? Do you ever go through that? Well, interesting, because that prayer, I think, for me was rooted in this, where it's like, just for Joseph's sake, we'll make things go okay, right? This kid's already been through quite a bit. And he was, and it says the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house, in the field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife casts her eyes upon Joseph and says, "Lie with me." And he refuses and says to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" So God was his main concern. And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he wouldn't listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her, no matter what. He wasn't swaying from what he knew to be righteous and to be a good steward of the charge he was given. And that is redundantly said, the charge over, right? But one day, when he went into the house to do his work and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she catches him by his garment. Now remember, the father made him that special garment? Well, it was a recognizable garment. And of course, they returned it to the father with animal blood on it. And the father is just mourning, right? Remember that? When you read that story, you'll see that. But he leaves his garment in her hand, like he wriggles out of his own garment, right? And he flees out of the house. As soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she's like, aha, I can mercurially make up something and I have some evidence I can twist and spin so people will believe me. Does that sound familiar? Have you seen that lately? I can take something tangible and completely pervert the meaning of how the truth of how I came in possession of this garment. He left it to be righteous. She holds on to it as proof that he wasn't righteous. It's very disturbing. But let's see what happens. So she calls to the men of her household and she says, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us." So what does she do? She appeals to their pride and their ego, which people need to have. We don't need to be laughed at, and she knew where to go. "He came in to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice." So basically, he was assaulting me, and I resisted. "And as soon as he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." Now, first of all, that's a very dumb story, because I would think a person running naked out of a house would be something people would notice. So why would you do that if you were guilty? Just saying. I'm Team Joseph all the way. So he's like one of my favorite people in the Bible. I can't wait someday to meet him in the world to come. And then she lays up the garment by her until his master came home. So she keeps this fake evidence. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you brought among us." So she's like, "You brought this into our life, came into me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house." As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. She said all the right words in all the right ways, and he believed her. So Joseph's master takes him and puts him into the prison. So he comes as a slave. He gets put over charge of good things. Now he's in prison. And this is the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was in prison there. But the Lord was with Joseph. So sometimes you'll go to prison because the Lord is with you. "And showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." So even in the prison, the keeper of the prison, it says, he puts Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. He was this capable, incredible, charismatic, God with him guy. So guys, if you're worried about, is it cool to be God's? It is very cool. So the keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge. He trusted him completely because the Lord was with him. Whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So sometimes you might see somebody and they say, oh, this happened to me or whatever. And if they've been righteous and somebody's falsely accusing them, it's like, oh, the favor of the Father must be upon you. And there's something that's going to come into perfect order. That's how I see it. That's what that story tells me. I've seen it happen too. I've given people that counsel and it has worked. Or it has been prophetic in terms of like, don't worry, your promotion is happening. And then you see it happen. You just have to have the spiritual eyes to see and the trust that God's got this whole thing. So then you see Joseph, and we won't read it all, but he interprets two of the prisoner's dreams, and he finds out, like, he's able to reveal something that you can only know through interpreting a dream. And then he interprets Pharaoh's dreams, because it looks like God gave Pharaoh a dream, information from the heavenlies, so Joseph could interpret it. And so this takes us down a road of some interesting conversation. And here's what I would say about this. I want to take this into our modern day and in our kingdom building lifestyles, right? The way that we live, the way that we interact with people. What does this mean today? Obviously, there is enormous need going on in our nation. I'm in the United States, and you see this so much happening. And it's weird how much the portion fits in with everything that we seem to be going through week by week. I don't know if that's a coincidence. If I believe in those, I don't. But also, life is life then and is now, and people are people, right? And so you will see the Bible continue to read you as you read it, and it will read what's happening in the world. The Bible is incredible. It's a living thing. It's always alive. But having different natures, I wanted to talk about it because we see Joseph has this righteous nature. Now, it says he's preferred by the father, hated by the brothers, and his nature was to do the right thing. He was the good guy, right? He was the good guy. He wanted to, please the father, do the right thing. And no matter where he was put, he was faithful in what he was charged with. It's like he had this nature. And so the idea is like that there's like a lot of different people that believe, like, is it nature or nurture? And I'm going to say yes. I think it's a combination of things. And a lot of people think, well, and this is interesting. Have you ever met people and it just seems like they are like very, just like sort of righteous people. It just kind of comes naturally to them more than the average. Have you met people like that? It just seems like they're drawn toward study. They're drawn toward giving and caring, and they just have this nature. And then you have other people that are born and they're just more angst, right? Just angst, just struggle more. Maybe they question, is God real more? Or like, why would I want a God or whatever, right? Different people have different natures. Does that seem fair? I don't know if you think everything should be fair. I would say everything is fair, but just not in a way that we can, we have a metric to measure that, because I don't think we do. I don't think we have God's metric because he gets things we don't get. But think about Jacob and Esau. Let's go back to Joseph's father. Let's just start there. God even says there are two different types of people in your womb. And the sages even say that when Rebecca would walk by a place of worship, that Jacob would writhe in her. And when she walked by a place of harlotry, Esau would writhe. Like the idea would be that from the womb, you had, is it an all-knowing God that said this is what will happen, or this is the way I've made them? It doesn't clearly tell you either, and that would be a theological issue for you to wrestle with. But interesting, is that interesting? I mean, how can we view that without needing to make the Bible palatable for you? I'm still going to pursue some attachment ideas and see what you think. So if you have these different natured people, right? So Jacob, right? He sees Rachel. He asks for her hand in marriage and works 7 years. And then works another 7 when he gets tricked into marrying Leah. That's a committed, loving, invested person with that nature. Let's go back even further, where he cared for the birthright, the inheritance, where Esau despised it, didn't care. He was indifferent. He wanted the stew. And Esau went and married foreign wives, went against what Adonai said. So you can see these natures were manifesting just in their lives. And so if that's complicated to you, it should be on some level, because we should be thinking about these things. But if people have different natures, and some people have more of a proclivity toward like a not as good nature, and other people seem like it comes easier for them to operate in the realm of holiness or whatever, maybe that's not always so bad, because how it's used and what purpose it can form. And I'm not saying like God's playing chess with people. I'm going to give him a bad nature, so it's going to make this work out. But to what extent does this whole entire thing work out with people? Because I know people that have a nature toward one side or the other. I have my own nature. And people, I do notice, I'm a therapist, right? I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I'm sitting in front of people for 21 years, seeing their nature and seeing people. Well, you learn quite a bit from a lot of hours of sitting with people. And you learn about nature, people's nature, and how they're nurtured and how that impacts them. But there's a lot of people just kind of born a certain way. And so how do we deal with this? Now, how do you deal with a person? You can deal with people that have, I would say, like, what's that saying? So heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. Okay. Where people are just so aggressive with the way that they are. That's really difficult. I would put that on the challenging nature side. But then you have other people that are like more simply natured, easier, just kind of like laid back, more passive. And yet that doesn't mean passive. It just means that's their role. That's how they approach the world. Here is how we can handle this. I want to help you, just the way I see things might help you, about how to deal with people with different natures. You're going to encounter them. Now, there are going to be people that you don't have great chemistry with. And those people, I'm going to tell you something. If you are sorting and sorting and sorting, that relationship is not good for you. And it is not kingdom building to keep getting all involved and enmeshed in it. Some people you love from afar. That's okay. That's boundary setting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what are some ways that we can deal with people where their nature is difficult? They have more of an angst nature. How can we do this? Oops, I hope I have a new camera. Do you see? Is anything different? We're going to see. I wanted to say that during this teaching so I could compare. Okay, let's talk about different natures. Okay, so let's just say you're dealing with a person with more of a challenging nature. Okay, they don't seem to be attracted to the Bible like you do, or they don't want to learn the creation gospel, as interesting and fascinating as that is. They don't want to read Dina Dye's book. They don't want to listen to a teaching by Valerie Moody, where we would stand in line for days to do any of those things, right? We can't wait to listen to Rico. We are on board. Some people, I don't know, just no. I want to say this. When you're dealing with people, let's just even say a atheist or just a person in your life, right? Just dealing with people. I want to bring your attention to remembering, here's our strategy. And I always say this, and you know me, you know exactly where I'm coming from, because I've said this a million times if you watch this program. But the first thing is to be comforted in knowing that God is the judge and you are not. And if you think that's a rebuke, you are missing the point of what relief feels like. You are not the judge. You're not put in that position to make a judgment on this person, their actions, their nature, the way that they handle things. And if you look at Luke 7, this is interesting. This has always struck me as how to deal with people's nature, knowing you don't know, which I think is really interesting. It's Luke 7, and you go to verse 36. Then one of the Pharisees invited Yeshua to eat with them, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a sinful woman from that town learned that Yeshua was dining there, she brings her alabaster jar of perfume. It's a whole interesting thing right there, but we don't have time to get into it. As she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wipe them with her hair. So she was having a change of heart, would you not say? Then she kisses his feet and anoints him with the perfume. When the Pharisees who had invited Yeshua saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who this is and what kind of woman is touching him, for she is a sinner. Now remember, there are different types of Pharisees, and please don't demonize Pharisees, because while there were Pharisees that were struggling with their attitudes, there were many that weren't, and there's different types of Pharisees. So just throwing that out there. But Yeshua answers him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Do you love that? Imagine the Messiah saying that to you. Simon, I have something to tell you. He's creating safety around this conversation from my perspective. He's saying, Simon, I want to tell you, I want to tell you something. Listen, hear me. This is going to change your life. Tell me, teacher, he says. 2 men were debtors to a certain money lender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. When they were unable to repay him, he forgave both of them. But which one then will love him more? I suppose the one who is forgiven more, Simon replies. You have judged correctly, Yeshua said. And turning toward the woman, he says to Simon, do you see this woman? When I entered your house, you did not give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but she has not stopped kissing my feet since I arrived. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. Therefore I tell you, because her many sins have been forgiven, she has loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little. So she was just indulging him, where Simon was following and just going along with the flow, which Yeshua was not upset with him. He was pointing out, you're judging, I want you to hear this. Hear where I'm coming from. What this woman's doing in the face of her previous lack is what a U-turn. What a U-turn. So people that have natures that we aren't always crazy about, or we're judging, right? Take yourself out of judgment that you don't even know the depths to which changes are happening there. That nature, it's like turning the Titanic around. It's so hard, right? You can hear crushing steel as people are turning. And how incredible is that? Just even whether we ever see it or not, just between the Father and that person. Take yourself out of the judgment and be relieved in that piece of advice, okay? Because that's good. Let's see what time it is. I want to make sure I'm not going over on my time. Ooh, boy, this hour just goes by. Okay, so we're talking 7 ways to accept different natures. Sorry, I'm allergic to the state of Florida. That's always going to happen. Well, I'm not going to say it's always going to happen, but it has so far happened. Number 2 out of 7, because we want to do perfection, right? We want to do a completion. Number 2, a person of another nature, a person that doesn't believe what you believe, isn't where you think they should be or whatever. Deal with them where they are. Jacob was an example about this, and we talked about this with when he was going to meet Esau. He knew Esau liked stuff. He wanted unity with Esau. He wanted peace with Esau. And so what does he do? He sends gifts. He's not like that loser. He's like, well, what's his love language? Stuff. Here, take stuff. I'm your brother and I want peace. And he told all the people in his company the peace he wants. Like, you tell him, I'm here. I'm your brother and I come as your servant. So deal with people where they are. And this isn't a condescending thing like stoop down to their level. It's like, no, just find out who they are and deal with them squarely without trying to change them. Just love people. Love your neighbor as yourself. So who are they? What do they? Make a banana bread if they like banana bread. If they like movies, talk about movies. What they are is good enough for you. Remember that. What your neighbor is good enough for you. It's good enough for the Father because he loves them. It's good enough for you. Okay. That kind of goes into the next thing where it's like find unity. Okay. So find unity. So where do you agree? The idea is that we're not always trying to, catapult people into our pasture or lure them in and try to say, I'm going to love them into the kingdom. I appreciate when you say that and I get where you're coming from. But remember just to love people because God loves them. And it's up to him to change them, not you. Remember that. So what does unity look like? Well, for Jacob, it was sending stuff. For us, it depends on the person. Like I said, what if you have a neighbor and you've never talked about anything deep or whatever, but they like going to the movies? Maybe if you like going to the movies, you can talk about movies that you have enjoyed. Where do you have unity? Maybe politics. I know you're told not to talk about religion, politics, or child rearing, but I don't even know how boring you are to never, ever bring these things up. Because how boring is that? What do you talk about? Movies are political and are about child rearing and become everything, whatever. But books you've read, the weather, which is so boring. But hey, you know what? People do like talking about the weather. Tell stories, funny stories of your kids or of your pets or whatever. But find unity where you can without this idea that you're always trying to hedge them toward another direction. Just accept unity, enjoy unity, find unity and seek it. You can have a delightful conversation, and that would mean more than if you're hedging your bets that you could get them into your affiliate program spiritually in your downline. I'm making fun of that, but you know what I'm saying. Remember, for number 4, I would say that being authentic is a big part of this. Just be yourself. If you have a belief and you have a strong belief and the person's like, I can't believe that God allows all rape. And you can say, God does not allow it. It's a commandment he has that you're not allowed to do that. Now, people do it. That's what they do. God did not allow it. He forbade it. And then they'll inevitably usually say, yeah, but he didn't stop it. Well, God gives free will. And we work this planet out the way we work it out. And he's there for the ones who ask. And he's, well, what about the girl? I don't have to answer for all of God's everything. But that girl, God is there for that girl. I'm not minimizing rape or trying to make anything look bad here. What I'm trying to say is get out of this idea that you don't have to talk about what you actually believe too. You're allowed to bring up what you believe. So we go from the spectrum of like, let's talk about movies. Let's talk about politics. Let's talk about like what kind of light bulbs you like. But let's also, in an honest conversation, if they say, how do you work through being locked at home and not going anywhere and feeling like you can't even see your family? Well, God's my refuge. I like to study. It gives me hope. It's forward thinking. It's also past thinking where things were really interesting the way it worked out. The Bible's an interesting book, whatever. That you're allowed to do that. And it doesn't look like you're trying to like, slurp somebody into your world in some fake way. Just be authentic, be yourself, tell the truth. And that's authenticity, right? That's authenticity. So having a relationship for the sake of having a relationship on its own is going to be a true connection. Out of that, if you're blessed and it happens naturally and it falls into your lap, in attachment work, we say first we connect, then we correct. Now, am I going to correct people? No. But if a person asks me, say I've connected with them and they ask me a question about God and they have this perjurous idea of him as bad or mean in the way that he's been translated to so many people for so many years, yeah, I'm going to correct that. I'm going to work at correcting that. But I've connected with them. And so there's a connection that we have that's really authentic, and I'm able to correct. I'm given that mitzvah to correct and to speak truth into this person's life. Open air preaching, not my thing. We just go to the grocery store and take out the loudspeaker in the aisle and be like, everybody in aisle 14, if you're not safe, I don't believe in that. I believe in connection. I don't believe in randomly screaming words out. I just really don't think that's helpful. Not that it matters what I think. I'm just the one talking here. So I'm giving you my idea. Appreciating people without an agenda would be number 6. Okay. People are loved by God and are made in the image of God and have the spark, the speck of light of God, right? People are loved by the Creator. So they should be loved by you. And this shouldn't be quibbleable. Now, everybody isn't easy to love. I'm the first person to say, like I said, there are some people I like to love from afar. But if you can just let go of the agenda, like I said, a lot of these kind of overlap with each other because I keep going back to that theme, that true love casts out all fear. And the fear would be, I'm afraid of their future afterlife. Well, you know what? You can't worry about that more than they do. And also, you have to know that God's got that. That is not your job. I don't think people really understand the Great Commission and what that means. But we do have internet and we do have media and we do have newspapers and pamphlets and Bibles and books and all kinds of things. And people have heard that there's a God. And so, commission accomplished. Now, love people. Just like love them. Be authentic with them without an agenda. Don't be like, I want to meet those people for the sake of telling them about God. How about just meeting people for the sake of meeting people and being friendly on the planet and getting to know people and just loving people? But then if the Father had orchestrated this relationship for this purpose, and you never know. I mean, I have actually had relationships with people where I didn't even know for years later. They were like, you were just nice to me. And, I believe in God now, but I remember you believed in God. You never mentioned it though. But I mean, you would here and there say a little thing. It would be naturally unfolding out of conversation. And, those things did stick with me. So it doesn't mean we don't naturally, like I said, tell the truth about who we are. And that makes me sound like such a saint. I'm just telling you a nice, favorable thing that I have heard from people. But that's happened. And it's such a blessing when it comes back around and that person's like, yeah, you were always very honest. And that was something I appreciated about you or whatever. So it was all about just kind of carrying those biblical principles as flowers and always adhering to them, being the people that God made you to be. And I would say the 7th, in dealing with people with other natures or other beliefs or whatever, I want to say this: learn from them. Learn from these people. These people, I don't even like to say it like that, but do you know that there's something that you can learn from a person that thinks differently from you? Sometimes I will use a quote on Facebook that I feel like is a really great quote. And somebody will come at me because they'll be like, do you know that person believes X, Y, and Z? Or do you know that that's a Zen thing or whatever people want to say? And I'm like, but the quote's true. It's a great quote. It moved me and I want to share it. And people get so upset, but truth comes from a lot of different places. Just because somebody, and a lot of it, I'm going to say, is copyright infringement from the Torah, ripped out, used as wisdom in other sectors of society, and then taking credit for it for their own. But, I have no problem quoting a book, quoting an author, quoting somebody, something smart that somebody who doesn't even believe in God might say, but it's a factual, good comment that's like helpful. because I don't think we should be separating ourselves to that huge degree as like us and them. It doesn't mean we're not saying, hey, family, get you. You know, there's that knowing gaze or whatever. Of course, there's different levels of connection we have with people. But you can always learn from someone. In the Bible, they learned from a donkey. God used the donkey. A fleece, right? There's all kinds of different ways that the Father speaks to us through the rocks, through the wind, in all of the ways that we can live. And if we can just stop thinking that we are in control of all this and we can just actually be friendly and nice and not so myopically focused on some agenda, we can actually be humans and not just agents of God and warriors of God and soldiers for God, but we can just be the people of God. And I think when people can start getting that through their heads and get to this place of like, of just loving their neighbor as themselves, you're going to see enormous changes, not in just them, but in you, because you're going to start recognizing all the places God is. And God gave Pharaoh a dream so Joseph could interpret it and save the world. He wasn't like, Pharaoh doesn't believe in the God I believe. I'm sure his dream means nothing. No, he actually knew what it meant. He worked with the Egyptians. He looked like them. He married into that system. And he saved his family. And they reunited. And eventually his bones were taken to the land of the patriarchs, to Israel. So isn't there a lot to that we need to get, we need to understand? We have to remember that we aren't outcome knowers. We're process builders. We're just going to take one step at a time in love. And that's got to be enough. That's got to be enough today. Today, that's all I can do is today. All I know is today. And really all I know is this moment. Tomorrow doesn't belong to me, nor does yesterday. The memory of it does. The lesson, right? It's true. So like Nelson Mandela says, I never lose. I win or I learn. And if we can just take that attitude that it's never about loss, it's about learning. It's about victory in knowing that you're learning. And I think that if people could rest in that, that beautiful instruction that I am giving here about getting out of the judgment seat, take yourself off that throne and just stop thinking that you know the way this should go. Now, we have really great intentions. Like we have a dream. We really do. We're like, you know what's going to happen? This empty house next door, people are going to move into this house and they are going to be hungry one day. And I'm going to have made the perfect casserole and it was their favorite. And I'm going to bring it over and they're going to eat it. And then they're going to be coming over because they'll hear my beautiful worship music and they'll be like, oh, that was so soothing. And then they're going to love God because they feel safe. That's a beautiful dream. I join you in it. That doesn't mean anything. That's just an idea. This might be a whole nother thing. There might be all kinds of calamities like happened to Joseph that's going to happen between you and this neighbor. Who knows? You might break your ankle on their property and get sprayed by a skunk and they help you and somehow you become friends that way. Like you understand, like you don't know, but don't discount all of the bizarre things that will happen to you that will bring you to that next level. Very flippantly, I say with Joseph, like he was in prison. It was meant to be. Let's say that to ourselves. But there's many things that are meant to be. They are meant to be and they will happen and they will not look the way you think. And I don't think anything that's ever really been significantly incredible has ever happened the way I thought it would happen. We think we're going to have this election. It's going to be a landslide. We're all whatever we are. Or people are like, we're going to have this election. It's going to be a landslide on this side and everyone's just going to be happy. None of that's happening. So we're all wondering how this will all work out. And everybody's so upset. And I'm like, listen, I've had such a strange peace. God will work this out. And we don't need to be fighting mad every second. We don't like unrighteousness. We don't want that. But I do think that we're in trying times, and this is all about how we treat our neighbor, how we view our neighbor. And I'm the first one to say it to myself. It's not easy. None of this is easy. And none of this looks like the way we think it should. And so we do have to lay out our fleece. And like many times, that fleece will remain dry or remain wet because we really think we have this picture. We have this movie mentality, I call it, magical thinking, where we have this idea of how things are going to transpire that would have a great impact. But then read the Bible. Read these stories. Like, read about the twins tomorrow. I was like, understand, like, these stories, like Gomer and Jose, like, do you understand, like, these stories are strange, and like, how is this is going to work out? I never would have pictured that. Because you know the story and what happens, you're very comfortable with the story. Imagine if you're reading the Bible the first time, you're like, what's going to happen? That's weird. There's so much, that tent peg through the head. I mean, right? There's just so much in the Bible that is odd and like outside of the realm of how we would plan it. And the best part about that is because our God is so big, and we don't predict him because he is big enough to meet our needs. He is capable of meeting your needs. Yes, you. He's capable of meeting my needs. If I can figure him out, we're in trouble. Okay? We are in trouble. And I say that all the time. We don't want to encroach on his territory. We don't want to breach in that trust between him and us by us trying to be him. And so that's a really big message for us. So in going through the portion, we cover Joseph, my favorite story. I keep saying they're all my favorite stories. I love the stories of the Bible. I love that it's a collection of stories of people that go through all of these things and interact with a loving divine God who is always out for them in every way that we can't picture or imagine. And it doesn't always look, or hardly ever does it ever look, the way we ever thought it would. And so nothing is going to look the way you think. So you better stop planning now and just start living and walking and persevere and just walk into your faith, walk into your neighbor's faith so they can have faith in you just as a person, and you can have faith in them. And just let that be enough for today. So that's my idea of how to deal with people that have a different nature, a different belief. Maybe you've left a certain faith system and you're in a new one and you don't know how to deal with people. Yes, you do. Love people. You know how to deal with people. They might not always be easy to deal with, but you can do it. You can do it. I know you can. I believe in you. I have faith in you. And the most important thing is that you try. And so remember that the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.